The night Mara Calloway knocked on my door at 11:17 on a Wednesday in November, I learned something I hadn't known I needed to know, that there are two kinds of standing still, the kind that means you've given up, and the kind that means you're finally waiting for the right thing. She was soaking wet and shaking slightly, and she said 4 words that rearranged everything I thought I understood about the next year of my life. I said yes before I even thought about what it meant. My name is Eli Navarro. I was 32, a Finnish carpenter. The kind who does the trim work, the built-ins, the final layer of detail that makes a room feel like someone actually thought about it. People hire me to come in at the end and make things look like they were always supposed to be that way. I was good at it. It was honest work, and it kept my hands busy, which I needed more than most people probably did. I had moved to this apartment building on Garfield Street in Portland about 8 months earlier, after a relationship that ended the way most of mine ended. Not in a fight, not in any dramatic unraveling, just a quiet Tuesday morning when Diane looked at me over her coffee and said, in her careful way, that she didn't think we were going anywhere. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't cruel, she was just accurate. I didn't even argue. I helped carry her boxes to her car. After that, I rented the 3rd-floor apartment at Garfield because it had good afternoon light and a window in the kitchen that looked out over the top of a birch tree, and because the wood floors were original and slightly uneven underfoot and felt like something I could trust. Mara lived 2 doors down, apartment 3D. I knew her the way you know someone in a building like that. In pieces, through glass. A glimpse in the hallway, a nod at the mailboxes. She had moved in about 3 months before me, which meant she had the kind of comfortable ownership of the shared spaces that I was still learning to read. She knew which elevator buttons stuck. She knew to take the stairs on laundry day. What I knew about her life, I'd assembled from the hallway. She was with someone. Tall, broad, the kind of man who moved through a corridor like he owned it. His name was Darnell, I gathered. He visited most weekends. He laughed loudly and left early on Sunday mornings, and the two of them occasionally had conversations through her door that were either arguments or not, depending on which part you arrived at. I didn't think about Mara in any particular way. That's the honest thing. She was the neighbor 2 doors down. She had a good coat, the olive-colored one she wore on cold mornings, and she sometimes hummed to herself in the hallway. That was the sum of what I knew, until the Wednesday in November. I'd been working on a job that week, a kitchen renovation in a house over in Selwood, replacing old cabinetry with painted shaker panels and running crown mold around a vaulted ceiling. The kind of work that requires you to be exactly precise or not bother at all. I'd come home with sawdust in my hair and the particular tiredness that comes from standing on a step stool for 6 hours with your arms above your head. I ate something I found in the refrigerator. I did not remember what. I was half watching a documentary about lighthouses on my laptop because I had learned that I could sleep better with someone else's narration in the room, and because lighthouses were about as far from complicated as anything I could name. The knock came at 11:17. I know the time because I was looking at my phone when it happened. 3 knocks. Not frantic, measured, the kind of knocking that is trying very hard not to sound desperate. I opened the door and Mara was standing there in the olive coat, which was soaked through. She had come up from the street without an umbrella. Her hair was down and water was moving along her jaw and dripping off her chin. She was holding her keys so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale around them. She looked at me for a long moment. "I left him," she said. "Can I stay with you?" I stepped back from the doorway. I don't know if that was invitation or just reflex. She came in. I got a towel from the bathroom. The big one. The gray one that I never used because it seemed wasteful for one person. I brought it out and she took it without looking at me and pressed it against her face, and I went to the kitchen and put water on for tea because I needed something to do with my hands. "You don't have to explain anything," I said, from around the kitchen corner. "I know." A pause. "I want to." I came back out and handed her a mug of water that was still heating, which was maybe the least useful thing I had ever done in my life, and she looked at it and the smallest thing happened at the corner of her mouth. "I'll let it steep," she said. "Sure." I sat down on the other end of the couch. She wrapped the towel around her shoulders and looked at the window, where the rain was coming down in long, diagonal lines against the glass. The Lighthouse documentary was still going on the laptop. A narrator was explaining, quietly, what it means to be a fixed light in a dark channel. I reached over and closed it. "We'd been together almost 2 years, Mara said. "Darnell's a good person. He's not a bad person." She said this like she needed to establish it, like she'd been arguing it with herself for longer than tonight. "But he has this thing, When something doesn't go the way he planned, he gets, not mean, just absent. He goes somewhere and takes the warmth with him. And sometimes I'd do something small, say the wrong thing, pick the wrong restaurant, and I'd spend 3 days trying to find my way back to him, following the map of what I might have done wrong. She set the mug down on the coffee table. Tonight, I just stopped. She looked at her hands. I was standing in his kitchen, and he was doing that thing, the going away thing, over something I genuinely cannot tell you what it was. And I looked at him and I thought, I am 41 years old, and I am too tired for this. She finally looked at me. Is that okay to say? Does that make me sound terrible? No, I said. It makes you sound accurate. Something shifted slightly in her expression. Not surprise exactly. Like she'd asked a question expecting one answer, and gotten a different one that fit better. I didn't know where to go, she said. I have friends, but it's almost midnight, and I didn't want to. She stopped. You always seem like you're okay with quiet. I didn't want to explain myself to anyone who was going to make it into a whole thing. I thought about that. The couch pulls out, I said. There's an extra blanket in the hall closet, the second shelf. She looked at me for a moment. Thank you, Eli. She said my name like she'd said it before, which she hadn't, and somehow that made it more startling. She slept on the pull-out. I slept in my room, or attempted to, which mostly meant lying on my back and staring at the ceiling, and listening to the rain reduce itself to a drizzle, and then stop entirely. I had lived alone for the better part of 2 years. I was used to knowing exactly what every sound in this apartment meant. The refrigerator's hum, the pipe's occasional opinion, the creak of the third board from the wall in the hallway. That night I heard her breathe, from 2 rooms away and through a door. I told myself I couldn't actually hear that. That didn't make it less true. In the morning I got up early because I always got up early, and I made coffee, and she appeared in the kitchen doorway at 7:15 in my extra blanket, wrapped around her shoulders, wearing the same clothes she'd arrived in, hair dry now and slightly wrong in the way hair gets when it dries without any particular intention. She was very beautiful in the morning. That's the simple fact of it. I noticed it the way you notice something you should have been noticing for months. She looked at the coffee maker. Is that yours? I said, and handed her a mug. She sat down at the small kitchen table and put her hands around it and looked out the window at the birch tree, which had lost most of its leaves by then, just a shape of branches against a gray November sky. I should call her, she said. Her sister, she'd mentioned last night. One of 3. You can use whatever you need. She looked at me over the rim of the mug. A long, level look that I didn't know how to read yet. Later I would know that look meant she was deciding something. You're very easy to be around, she said. I don't know why I didn't know that before. You had other things to know. She smiled at that. A real one, not the careful kind. It moved through her whole face. I made myself look out the window at the birch tree. She stayed 4 days. This was not planned. On day 1 she called her sister, and her sister said she could come stay with her in Eugene, which was 2 hours away, and Mara said she needed a day to think. On day 2 she said she was going to get more of her things, and she did. And she also came back with groceries, which she put in my refrigerator and did not ask about. On day 3 she made soup, a real one, the kind that takes most of the afternoon to smell right, and we ate it at the kitchen table while she told me about her work. She was a landscape architect. She designed public spaces, plazas and parks, and the medians on divided streets that most people drove past without noticing. Someone thought about all of it, she said. Every bench, every drain, every tree placed where it can survive the wind and still give shade in July. People don't see it. I see it, I said. She looked at me. That's not a line, I said. I do the finish work. Same thing. People walk into a room and it feels right and they don't know why. Exactly. She pointed at me like I'd said something that mattered. Exactly. I washed the bowls. She dried them. We did not talk for a while, and it was the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. On day 4, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with her coffee, and she said, I think I should go to my sister's. Okay, I said, not because I want to. She said it carefully, like she was checking her measurements. Because I think I need to be somewhere I'm not borrowing space from someone. You're not borrowing, Eli. She said my name the way she'd said it the first night. I am. A pause. Can I ask you something? Yes. She set down her mug and folded her hands around it. Were you ever going to say anything? She said. While I was here? I looked at her. About what? She held my gaze for a moment. Okay, she said. Just that. Like the answer was more complicated than I was admitting, and we both knew it, and she was going to let me off the hook anyway. She left for her sister's on a Friday afternoon. I helped her carry 2 bags to her car. It was cold, the first really cold day. The sky that flat white that means weather coming. She put the bags in the back seat and turned around and stood there with her keys in her hand, and I stood there on the sidewalk with my hands in my jacket pockets. "Thank you," she said. "Genuinely. Any time." She smiled at that, not sarcastic, something else. "I'll be back in a week," she said, "for my things." "I know." She drove away. I stood there a little longer than I needed to, not because I was watching her go, but because the cold felt honest, and I wasn't ready to go back inside to the quiet yet. She came back in 12 days, not 7. I heard her in the hall. That's how it started. I heard the particular sound of her key in her door, and then I heard the sound of her stop in the hallway, and then I heard her knock on mine. I opened it. She looked like herself again. Whatever the 2 weeks had been, they'd done something. She was standing in the hallway in a different coat, dark burgundy, one I'd never seen, with her bag over her shoulder, and she looked at me with those eyes that always seemed to be arriving at a conclusion, just slightly ahead of what she said. "I'm back," she said. "I can see that." She tilted her head slightly. "Are you going to make me explain this?" "No." She let out a breath. Something in her shoulders dropped about a quarter inch. "I thought about it the whole drive back," she said. "What I wanted to say. And? I'd spent 2 years with someone who made me feel like I was always a little bit wrong. A little too much." A pause. "You're the first person in a long time who just let me be what I was. Even when what I was showed up on your doorstep at midnight in the rain." I leaned against the doorframe. "You weren't hard to let in," I said. She looked at me. Then she looked down at her keys in her hand. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "I want you to know that." "I don't either," I said. "But I'm willing to figure it out slowly." She looked up. There it was. Not a declaration, not a promise. Just 2 people in a hallway on a cold December evening, both of them telling the truth about what they didn't know, which was somehow the most certain I'd felt in a very long time. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. She didn't go inside her apartment. She came into mine instead. I made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. The birch tree outside had ice on the branches, and it caught the streetlight and held it. We talked until 2 in the morning. I don't remember everything we said. I remember the shape of it, the moving from one thing to another the way a good conversation does, not because it has to go anywhere, but because the company is reason enough to keep going. At some point she said, "I'm glad I knocked on your door." "I'm glad you knocked too," I said. She smiled at the window. "You could have just said you were glad." "I could have," I said. "But I meant the rest of it." That was 2 winters ago now. She moved 2 doors down the hall into her apartment, and I stayed in mine, and for a while that was exactly the right arrangement for 2 people who had both learned to be careful. We took our time. We earned it. She moves through rooms like she designed them. Not like she owns them, like she thought about them before anyone else did, and placed every element where it would do the most good. I notice this about her constantly. The way she orients toward the light. The way she stands in a plaza she's designed and watches people use it, and something quiet happens in her face when they do what she hoped. I finished a kitchen last spring in a house in northeast Portland. Built-ins from floor to ceiling, shaker doors, the crown mold running flush at the corner with not a single visible seam. The homeowner walked in and looked at it and said, "It feels like it was always supposed to be here." She said that. Mara was with me. She reached over and took my hand without looking at me. Some things you build, some things you just finally stop getting in the way of. Have you ever had someone show up at your door in a moment you couldn't have planned for, and you made a choice in that doorway that changed everything that came after? And have you ever been the kind of quiet that someone else needed, without knowing that's what you were doing until it was already done? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.